Well, as I was saying before, that my concern was I was the hero of my own speech. And David Brooks said that, yeah, you're the hero, but you're also using self-deprecating or depreciating type of humor. And I think people will forgive you for that, and obviously that turned out to be the case. So getting back to your original question, I never really truly felt comfortable because of A, the audience participation, and B, I was being the hero of the speech until I actually gave the speech.
Well, let me tag on something
Please.
to your audience participation part, just as an example of how that really solidified your title and by extension your message into people's brains. Several years after the fact, before 2003, my youngest son got in a little bit of a scrape, had to go to the ER, and he was in there in a lot of pain. And I mean, he was toughing it out because he's a tough little guy. And I remember him. I asked him, I said, you know, this is kind of rough, isn't it? And he said to me, "Yeah, Dad, but it's like Ed Tate says, sometimes it's just one of those days." Now, you know what? That may not have been the exact pure application of your message, but the fact is that audience participation made that such a memorable thing that in his moment of need for something as a coping mechanism, he'd seen it or heard it enough while I was studying it to latch onto that. So, you know, it was a game changer for your contest speech, but it also, you know, echoed through in positive application for people.
Well, thank you for sharing that.
Did you get any opposite advice from the previous world champions? I know when I was working on mine in the fall, Mark, every Toastmaster club that I went to, well-meaning Toastmasters without the experience that Mark Brown had, said, you know, you have to get up sooner. And when Mark saw it, he said, no, you have to stay down longer. Because A, it's more tough to do, but B, it's more of the real metaphor that you're trying to convey, because nobody jumps up. But how about you?
Well, I got advice that certainly was different than what people were saying, but kind of in a different direction. Well, for preparation for my district speech, I had a story that I thought, man, this is a great story, and it really fits my message well. And David Brooks said, you know, this story is kind of thin. And I'm like, well, but I like this story. You know,
I like this story.
And the audience that I was practicing for, they thought, man, that's just great. And like, why? And he said, it's a very predictable story. The outcome is very predictable, and it therefore doesn't have as much power when you get to here's the lesson. And I'm like, doggone it, he's right. And so I had to change because of, I knew that he was right in spite of what people were saying, because it wasn't a bad story. But you won't accomplish great things with stories that are not bad.
The movie won't do as well as in the box office.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Well, have you ever seen a program or a movie where you could predict what the end is going to be?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and
So you check out. It's like,
yeah, you
okay.
check out. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So.
Cool. What about? Well, you said you were here every single night. First of all, I didn't even know you could get in the room every night.
Well, we're not supposed to be in here right now.
We didn't
we're
say
waiting for the
he could
Toastmaster Mafia to
officially
come
get
us.
in.
Right.
Okay.
But, well, you know what? Honestly, that's one of those cases where the cliche holds true. It's easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. You know, if you... Yeah, that's all I probably should say. That's all I should say.
We'll just leave it at that.
Yeah.
And we're talking about speaking here.
David Brooks had given me the advice. He said, the day that you get to the hotel, get up on that stage and don't get down till you're comfortable, and get up again. And I still do this in corporate speeches. The night before, I will get up on the stage, even if it's a small one, just to get comfortable with that environment. So I know I'll look out and I'm going to see the panel wall in the back. I'm going to see the doors and the exit signs on both sides. And you want to be so comfortable that the atmosphere is not an issue, is not new that day.
Right. Yeah, and there's always going to be different idiosyncrasies about every place that...
Some more than others.
Yes. And armed with that knowledge, that's just one less obstacle you might have to face, which puts you that much closer to success.
We talked about earlier about nuggets, and I did get one little nugget that helped me. I think it helped me dramatically to look at my play not just as a speech. Look at my speech not just as a speech, but as a play. And when I looked at my speech as a play, 5 different scenes, 5 different characters. And once I was able to look at it that way, then that's when I looked at the stage differently.
Yeah.
For example, I'm assuming that you've seen my speech, and if you haven't, you know,
You need to.
you need to, okay? And you need to see,
I
you need
can
to see
say
all
that.
of ours. And anyway, so scene number 1 is I get a ticket from the police officer. That is stage right. Then there's security. There's security. That's halfway between stage right and center stage. Then the main scene takes place at customer service. Then stage left is a confrontation with the angry young man, and then we go back to center stage at the ticket counter with the meeting with the manager from the airline. So when I was able to look at it at 5 different scenes, 5 different characters, it was easier for me to rehearse and also to practice it.
Right.
So when I got in the night before, I asked them, hey, can I put some tape down? And they said, oh, no, you can't do that. That's against the rule. Well, I snuck back in. Couldn't find any tape, but I found these fluorescent dots that I actually put onto the stage. And we had a hardwood floor in Miami Beach, Florida.
Ooh.
So I actually took these little dots and I put them in my, and the benefit of the fluorescent dots was all the way from backstage, I could see my marks.
Yeah.
So the fact that I could see my marks, it made me feel comfortable. Okay, I'm going to go here for that. The other benefit of having the marks was I was a pacer. Early on in my career, I was one of these people who would just go back and forth, and I said to myself, I was determined not to pace. So I would land on those marks, and I said, I can't move until it's time for the next scene. So that was the benefit of me, working the stage the night before.
I also love hearing about when you went to David Brooks with your concern. That's a great story.
Oh, you tell it.
Well, let me just set it up.
Okay.
The point was, I always remembered hearing the story of Ed calling David Brooks and said, David, I have a problem with my speech. What's the problem? Nobody dies.
And here's the context of that. My club, my district, had actually retrieved the previous 9 years of the finals of the World Championship of Public Speaking. And I noticed a pattern. The top 3 finalists, there was always either someone dead or dying. And all of a sudden, I noticed in my speech, there was I didn't even have anyone who was even ill.
No work, somebody lives.
Nobody even had a sniffle. There was nothing.
So I had to kill somebody in my speech, And David just told me, he said, don't follow the crowd. He says, give that speech that's right here. He says, follow this. He says, don't follow the crowd.
And of all the stories behind the stories, Jim's is probably the most amazing in the history of the contest. To come back twice and then win it the following year. I mean, that's flipping unbelievable.
But I got to tell you, 2002, first of all, 2002, in my opinion, you won. And I realized that was a devastating loss.
Yes.
I mean, we all felt your pain that year. But, from every setback, there's a comeback, and for you to come back that following year, after that devastating loss, I mean, that is the things that legends are made of, and I truly admire you for that moment, because I was there. I mean, I was 2 feet away from you, and I know the impact it had on you, and I saw your children there, and for you to come back and say, I'm going to do this for my kids. To this day, I'll never forget that as long as I live.
Thank you. Appreciate that. I don't know what to say.
I just,
Well, everything happens for a reason. I believe that, and if anybody who has heard the keynote address that I give, where I talk about that, they'll know that. They'll know that in 2002, my intention was intentionally wrong. I mean, I was hung up on, I wanted the badge and the trophy and the accolades, and I wanted to be in the program every year at the convention and get to go and do all the cool things that I knew the other champions were doing. And so it was all about, this is about me. It's about me. And I think I was raised in such a way that even being at that point, if I had won, I don't think I would have become an ego monster. But I think that I was at a point of needing to learn a valuable lesson that was larger than any of this stuff. And that took me down several pegs. And I had to decide, why is it that I want to do it, and what are my driving factors. And for me, like I said earlier, it was about being an example for my kids in times where they thought something happened that was hurtful or unfair. And I appreciate your comments that you thought I won in 2002. But if anybody who hears this, I want to say, Dwayne Smith, I have every confidence that he is a deserving champion. And besides, I have a much cooler story now. So, in retrospect, but everything happened for a reason, and I think the reason that happened was so that I could learn a lesson and that I could be a resource for people who have contest and other experiences that they need a little bit of help understanding why things happen like that.
I think